for our hybrid press conference. This means that some colleagues are here on the ground, but some have also joined us virtually. You can ask questions, put them in the chat. I will read them out loud so the minister can answer them. And with this, I hand over to Minister Özdemir. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to welcome you to our press conference at the end of the G7 Agriculture Ministers meeting. There were demonstrations today by animal rights activists and farmers. I would have loved to engage in a dialogue with them, but I was the host of the meeting and had to be here to chair the meeting. But we decided to change locations because we wanted to ensure that our guests could leave in time to reach their flights or their trains or whatever means of transport. But I can tell you that our colleagues reacted quite late to this situation. They know from their own experiences in their own countries that there are demonstrations from time to time, which is also a strong signal for the democracy. And our head of Directorate General had talks with them, and I will also meet with the demonstrators next time I'm here in my constituency. The main topic, especially yesterday, was Russia's attack on Ukraine, which is in violation of international law, and this set the pace for our conference. We talked about global food security and looked at it from two different viewpoints. Not only did we talk about climate crisis, which challenges global food security, but the war has also increased pressure on the systems. Putin's unjustified war is exacerbating hunger in the world. We discussed this intensely and were very happy and grateful for the presence of our colleague from Ukraine, Minister Solsky. He painted a very clear picture of the dramatic situation in Ukraine. About half of the wheat agricultural area is in the east of the country, which is under battle. 20 million tons of wheat are still stored in silos and have to be transported to make room for more wheat. He expects 30 to 40 million tons that have to be exported out of Ukraine. And therefore, as G7 agriculture ministers, but also in collaboration with the EU Commission and the international organizations, we made a clear commitment to engage in long-term measures. First of all, we have to supply the Ukrainian population with food. This is our top priority. Secondly, we need to supply aid to the Ukrainian farmers. We are talking about fuel, fertilizers, seeds. And thirdly, we will also support Ukraine in exporting agricultural products. I was delighted that Commissioner Wojciechowski agreed with my proposal and has launched its own initiative by the EU Commission to establish more transport routes which will help Ukraine. However, Russia's war of aggression has other implications for the agricultural markets and agricultural products, and therefore we have made a commitment to monitor the prices more strongly. And to this end, we will strengthen the agricultural market information system, AMIS, for instance, also to monitor the fertilizer markets, because increased prices for inputs also contribute mainly to the higher prices for food. And therefore, the G7 member states will make funds available to AMIS on a voluntary basis. However, I also want to stress that we cannot just expect others to act, especially Germany as which has the presidency of the G7, has to act here. And I stated that Germany will double its contribution to AMIS and will provide 80 million euro. And I was very happy to hear that other countries will also increase their funds. And we also committed to take action to stabilize the markets. food must not be stored for an undue amount of time in the member states, because this would lead to a further price increase. And in this context, we also have spoken out against export stops and have urged to keep markets open. This is paramount if we don't want to further exacerbate the crisis. We are committed to have rule-based trade. This is the foundation for food security. And therefore, we also discussed our concerns. I just want to mention Indonesia's remark on palm oil, and we spoke out against export stops. And we also heard that India has imposed an export stop on wheat, and we discussed this issue intensely. Due to the heat waves in India, India had to make a downward adjustment of 25% to the original estimate of 110 million tons. And this shows the dramatic implications of the climate crisis. And this export stop mainly affects Bangladesh and Nepal, which heavily rely on these exports. And we therefore advise the G7 heads of state and government to address this issue at their meeting where India will participate in. And we also, as the G7 agriculture ministers, urge India to exercise its responsibility as a G20 member. The second big issue of our meeting was climate, biodiversity, and sustainability. I just mentioned it. We can already see the catastrophic impact, which has mainly an apocalyptic scope of the climate crisis. Temperatures of 50 degrees, 60 degrees in the soils. I'm at a lack of words here. Just imagine what this could mean for the future. And I'm happy that we came to an agreement here that we cannot solve this crisis by exacerbating other crises. During our meeting, we held intensive debates and came to a clear commitment on 3 topics: food security, climate change mitigation, and biodiversity. And this has been the priority of our debates, if you will. The Russian war of aggression is further increasing the dramatic situation regarding global food security. But the main reason for global hunger are climate crisis and biodiversity loss. Hunger is the biggest issue in those parts of the world most affected by the climate crisis and by biodiversity loss. The G7 want to and have committed to take a leading role in finding sustainable ways, or finding ways towards sustainable food systems, because the right to food can only be enforced if farmers globally are able to increase their productivity in a sustainable manner and to strengthen resilient ecosystems. And I'm also happy that we managed to show quite clearly with our G7 communique that small farmers produce 60% of food worldwide. They are the backbone of our system, and especially small-scale farmers are heavily affected by climate crisis. So we have to help them with knowledge, money, and infrastructure. In some countries of the global south, up to 50% of harvests are lost due to wrong storage or during transport. And all of this can be solved with quite simple measures, and it would be irresponsible not to take action. The G7 agriculture ministers also state that climate change mitigation needs healthy forests. We will advance climate change mitigation and adaptation and strengthen our efforts to stop deforestation and the destruction of forests. We also talked about fertilizers. You know that high prices for fertilizers are a major concern at the moment, and we have made a commitment to have a sustainable nutrient management. And I'm also very happy that my colleagues share my opinion that animal husbandry is also part of a functioning and ecologically sustainable agricultural sector. There can no be circular economy without husbandry, animal husbandry, and therefore our agricultural fertilizer must also be included in our strategies and must be able for agriculture. Also, not to be dependent on authoritarian regimes such as Russia, and we all agreed on this. We also committed ourselves to conserve biodiversity in agriculture, and this also includes the reduction of pesticides. And with this, I will come to a close so we can take your questions. Thank you very much, Federal Minister Özdemir. And now you have the floor. You can ask your question. The colleague of the SWR, you have the floor.
I can hardly hear the speaker, I'm afraid. What about the 80 million euros you were talking about? What about the other G7 members? Did they agree on the same amount to support Ukraine? Are there any figures, any specific figures which are now included in the communiqué? As you know, the G7 is not a global government, but we share our views and we make commitments, and then everything has to be put into practice internationally. Everything we are talking about here means, and I take it that what you can see in the communiqué is what will be advanced this year by member states. There was a clear agreement on that, be it pesticide reduction targets, be it cycles, production cycles, the topic of fertilizer strategies, farm fertilizer strategies, and organic farming and conventional farming sectors need to become more sustainable. This is to say that we need to reduce our dependency also here from authoritarian regimes. We need to reduce that also as regards inputs, and this is our task lying ahead of us. Now we need to translate this into practice. And there have been discussions. What about the policy of the new government in Germany? Is this shared by others? And if you take a look at the communiqué, you will see that and find what we wrote into our coalition agreement too, and what I see as a main focus of my strategies, that it is to say the G7 leading economic nations of the free world joined and committed to these goals, and this is very good because it strengthens my work too, and this also holds true for my colleagues. And him. We talked for a long time with our Ukrainian colleague on bilateral levels, but also in the plenary. And there we also addressed the questions, what can we do together? And this is why it was good that the commissioner was there too. But what can be done by each and every single country? And here I can tell you, without telling you any state secrets, that some countries lay down specific agreements with individual countries, what they can do, because the EU Commissioner Wojciechowski said, what can be done, where do you have problems? And this was also about the free part of Ukraine. What can be done there in order to re-establish a normal business sector? This is what we have been talking about, and I think you will see the practical implementation swiftly. Now, the next colleague, please, from ARD, I think. They need to use microphones, I'm afraid. I can't interpret. You mentioned the Indian export ban. What do you think about the decision of the Indian government? And what about the G7 meeting in Elmau in June? Will this be addressed there too? So I'll start with the last question. The heads of state and government were asked to address this topic, and as far as I can see it, as I've said, I think this is a very critical thing, because if now all of us start engaging in export bans, closing doors, then this will exacerbate the situation as regards exports. And this is also harmful for farmers there, because it means that there will be price hikes and price drops there. If we want to have price stability. If we want to avoid price hikes, then we shouldn't think about us only. We need to act together. We as leading nations have to shoulder responsibility, and we have to cooperate closely here. Now, there's a digital question, Heike Jahrberg from Tagesspiegel. I'll read it out. Mr. Özdemir, what about the monitoring of the markets? How is this to function in practice? We had Dr. Xu with us, the FAO representative, and we were talking about FAO's important role here, and we asked him expressly to give us the figures. We need ongoing figures, continuous figures, in order to enable us to change and shape our strategies accordingly. We need to have planning security here. I think this was a clear message, not only sent out by me, but also by our partners. They all shared this message. Then here, there is another question here on the ground. Two questions. The free part of Ukraine. Can you tell us more about what has been done there? What were the discussions about that? Let me start with the following. This is something which fits into the debate before. We addressed our plea that the sanctions against Russia shouldn't be circumvented. This is very important. This is decisive for the whole world. These actions by Russia shouldn't be rewarded. And secondly, China was called upon to cooperate with us too. This is also in the interest of China, that we make a contribution, that we know what is on the ground, what do we have there, cereals, food, what can be exported, then we can work properly. So this is what we were talking about as regards this question. And the second part of the question, what about Ukraine? Ukraine needs to describe what it still needs. As you know, my ministry has stayed in Ukraine. We have an embassy representative in Ukraine. He's not at the embassy at the moment, but there are specific talks going on. Once the embassy will fully reopen in Ukraine, our representative will continue to work at the German embassy in Kiev. And by this, we want to send out a signal of normality, of solidarity. Our person to contact is Kiev, is the government there, nobody else. And let me point this out quite clearly at this point in time, because the colleagues, the other agriculture ministers, attached importance to the following. We need respect, and we need to appreciate the work of the Ukrainian farmers. Some of them are the same. They fight in the Ukrainian armed forces, and they sow seeds. On the other hand, on their fields, they must make sure that there's enough harvest to sell on the markets so that they can make a contribution to Ukrainian incomes. But on the other hand, it's very painful to see that for the things they have worked for very hard are now being destroyed, because in principle, Russia does something which we already know from Russia's history. There are very sad recollections in Ukraine, Holodomor. You know that this is a very evil strategy of Putin, and we need to counteract this and take counteractive action. With regard to the timetable, and as there are other bilaterals after this meeting, that we only have time for one or two other questions. There is another live question which we can answer to. There are small-scale structures in the farming sector worldwide. There is a specific question, what are you doing there? Are there specific training measures? What were you talking about in this context? What about requests here? Are there requests saying The big ones are the good ones. The small-scale structures are not eligible here. As to the first part of your question, as you've said, this also expressly includes, as some colleagues said too, a focal point in our agricultural policy work. We need to strengthen the role of women in agriculture, access to education, to training, to seeds, of course, men and women. This is quite logical. And extension services, then cooling facilities, transport routes, roads, you name it. A lot could be done here, and many post-harvest losses could be avoided this way. If you keep in mind that 50% of the losses could be reduced, then you would have, if you reduce this, then you would have enough food for humanity. This is crazy. We're in the 21st century. We have a lot of expertise, we have a lot of production, but we are not able to really harvest what we grow in our fields. It gets lost, and it should be possible to do this better. And your question was also, what are we doing here? For instance, I said that this mentality, in referring to my own backyard, as regards the various ministries, everyone is focusing on his or her own ministry and does not cooperate. We should come to an end here. The Minister for Development Aid and I, myself, we are closely cooperating. We are accompanying us on trips, on field trips. The taxpayers need to bear in mind that it's their funds, it's not my funds, it's not funds coming from Svenja Schulze. And for the countries there, it's German projects. It's not projects coming from the German development aid or from the German agriculture minister. It's German funds. And this is how we should continue our work in future too. And I was very delighted to see that other ministers and countries work in this way too. And we need to take off our national glasses, if you like. The international level needs to come to the fore. This would be much better. And let me point to the questions we had before. We are not on our own. There are other countries active in Africa, for instance. But they don't ask about corruption, about human rights. They don't ask about women's rights. And they are not interested in sustainable developments where farmers benefit from and generate income, where they become independent from all of us. So it's important for us Europeans and also as G7 to be present there. And as to the other part of your question, this concerns me too, just as everyone else. We have small-scale structures in our farming sector too. I'm an agriculture minister of small-scale farms, of medium-sized farms and big farms, and all are very important to me. Just very short question and answer from the Tagesschau representative.
Your colleague, Foreign Minister Baerbock, also talked about global food security. Do you have any long-term plans? Well, first of all, I'm very grateful that our foreign minister is having our back here, and this provides more leverage. So, Annalena, I would like to thank you and your colleagues very much, your G7 foreign minister colleagues. I think that it would make sense to listen to our colleagues from Ukraine, from the agricultural minister, and we did this. However, in the short term, we have to think about what to do at the moment. We could use the railway, but you know, there are several issues. Then there's the question of the seaways. Can we use the can we use different rivers? Can we also use routes throughout the Balkan states? But these are only third best solutions. Why? Well, there's a reason why we used to go to Ukraine by sea, because this is the most cost-efficient way to transport goods. All other means are much worse because you can only transport a small percentage, lower quantities. So unfortunately, I cannot give you an answer because I don't know when the war will end, and I don't know whether Kiev or the Ukraine will have access to all regions, to the entire territory. However, if the war ends in a very short time, we will have more opportunities. However, if Russia will continue to curtail Ukraine's action, and this seems to be the strategy, if they will try to continue to destroy Ukraine, then the situation will be worse, and we have to prevent this. Due to our strict time schedule, we cannot answer any other questions. Thank you for your time. All the best to you. Please take a look at the communiqué. I think it will be worth your while. I think it has been a very good document. It's a very good document. Thanks to all of my colleagues, to all staff members collaborating on this. Thank you. The communiqué is available in English as well.